Welcome everyone to this webinar, a truly unique opportunity to hear from the experience of our three lovely panelists about their experience, their global experience with Menti.io. They have done a remarkable thing and we are happy to hear from them different details. I'll just mention that you're very welcome to write to us on the chat and also on the Q&A. Someone, I'm assuming Zvika will be the first to respond. He's very quick with these things. So thank you, Zvika. My name is Anat. I'm head of academic partnerships at Menti.io and also an instructor myself for over 15 years in different universities. I teach at government and business schools. And I feel really privileged to meet these extraordinary instructors from around the world using Menti.io, and I'd like to introduce our panel. But a second before I do that, I'll just say to the audience who does not know perhaps what Menti.io is, that Menti.io is what you might call a next generation discussion platform that highlights collaboration and basically organizes the discussion, offers very cool and useful analytics and assessment for the instructors. The analytics is also for the students, the assessment is for the instructors. So it's an extremely useful platform, and the specific use case that we're going to speak about today is the one where instructors, the three lovely panelists who use Menti.io in their courses, have also joined together our pioneers to have a truly global forum with students from three different universities. So I'll dive right in and make a very quick introduction to our panelists. So first I'll start with Professor Sophie Hayek from the Munich Business School. Sophie is a professor for marketing and communication, also the academic program director of international marketing and brand management. She teaches behavioral marketing, and her research focus is behaviors of consumers, particularly in health and sustainability. We're really, really happy to have you here, Sophie. Thank you. Our second panelist is Professor Kate Toth from the Conestoga College in Canada. And Kate is a professor of human resources at the International Business Management Program, director of the learning and development for the YMCA Workwell, which is a consulting group focused on helping organizations build healthier organizational cultures and support employee well-being. Truly a remarkable goal. Thank you, Kate. And last but certainly not least, Dr. Evaristo Doria from the Georgia State University, a senior lecturer for international business, co-director of minor in the Institute of International Business. His doctoral is actually in education, and he has a lot of passion and a lot of experience in business growth and education. Worked as business executive for leading corporates in more than 20 countries and for over 20 years, even though he's a very, very young guy. So I don't know how you got all that done. So really happy to have you here, Evaristo. So we're really, really privileged to have the three of you here. And I think we'll start by diving into a quick introduction that Sophie is kind enough to suggest to us to explain to you folks what the Global Forum is about. So I'll start by sharing my screen and then we'll turn the microphone. So these are the three panelists, you can see it here. And sorry, just a second before I'll turn to Sophie for an excellent explanation about the Global Forum. I just wanted to go over the agenda for today. So welcome and introductions, which we are doing now. Second part is going to be really interesting. I'm going to ask these three lovely panelists a few questions about their Global Forum experience. Third part, we'll have time for Q&A, and we're looking forward to hearing what you guys have in mind and what are your questions. And lastly, we'll finish with thanks and final remarks. I already described or mentioned that Ment.io is a very much well-organized platform with very powerful analytics and assessment. And now let's dive in to Sophie's explanation of what the global forums are. Please, Sophie. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anat. Hi, everyone. I'm Sophie, and together with my fantastic colleagues, Evaristo and Kate, we basically ran a pilot this March, which we have called the Global Forum. In fact, you may recognize this term from recent Ment.io emails because we're very happy to say that they have decided to roll out our pilot on a global scale. So we're very proud that our test run has led to such a great initiative. And with this webinar today, we want to show you why you may also want to participate in the Global Forum. So what did we do? You see a couple of screenshots here from the actual discussions. We've obviously blurred out any names. But what we did is last year we got together and we decided that we wanted to expand our student discussions on Ment.io beyond our own courses and into the classrooms of our international colleagues. We had some really great support from the Office of International Initiatives and the Atlanta Global Studies Center, and they helped us to set up a month-long online discussion across 3 universities in 3 different countries. In our preparation phase, we focused on a number of things, but most importantly, how to bridge the gap between the different course topics. And our learning here is that the right set of questions really is key. They need to fit with each course. They should offer the students the opportunity to apply their learnings. And most importantly, they need to resonate with them. We decided to go for an entire month with a set of 2 questions that we posted, one at the beginning of the month and one halfway through as a follow-up to the first question in order to build on the existing discussions. As an example, we basically asked one of the following things. So the first question was, how would you describe the culture of your home country? And we gave them an instruction. We said, please support your statement. For example, you can use the Hofstede cultural dimension theory or other research. And then in the follow-up question, 2 weeks later, we asked them the following. We said, looking at the previous discussion, where do you see the main cultural similarities and differences between your home country and the countries of your fellow students in this online discussion? And we gave them the instruction, please feel free to share business or organizational examples to illustrate your point. We randomly assigned our students to a total of 8 different discussion groups because we wanted to keep each group relatively smaller. Our previous experience has shown that about 50 participants is a really great discussion size. The students were then introduced to Ment.io. Those that hadn't already used it, they received an email invite to register on the website. And we provided some additional information on our end, like how we wanted them to behave, that they should discuss in a respectful manner, and to also remind them that they were representing both their university and their country. When we posted the first question, we basically left them a little bit to their own devices. And this worked well for some, but it didn't really work so well for others. So we then decided to engage here and there as instructors to encourage our students, to participate or simply to value their contributions in the discussion feed. And this really helped increase engagement rates. After 2 weeks, we went through all of the discussions. We wrapped them up with a concluding post, but we chose not to pick a so-called winner because we wanted to rather value the contribution of each discussion group as a whole. And then we posted the follow-up question where we had basically the same procedure. We closed the discussion after 2 weeks with a wrap-up. Overall, I think we all agree that the feedback from our students has been really positive, and they all really love the opportunity to engage with their classmates as well as others from all over the world in exchanging their views, but in also showcasing the things that they had learned in class. So thanks, Anat.
Thank you so much. It sounds fantastic. Well, you know what I think about this. Thank you so much for describing how it went. And I think for the benefit of the audience, we shared a few slides of how the activity of one of the groups what it looked like. And I'll just take 2 minutes to say something about the actual platform for the benefit of those who are not familiar with it. So what you're looking at here is a demo page, so no problem of privacy here. A demo page of Ment.io. Each and every one of the panelists have a similar group or groups on their Ment.io board. This is the name of the course, for example, and different questions that they have asked or the students were encouraged to ask during class. The idea is that students engage in a discussion that is very well organized for them. It's very clear where the instructor had highlighted something or where the discussion is just rolling itself. The interesting part is that when students want to engage with one another, they can do it in different ways. They can vote their level of agreement and see how others have voted for it. They can reply with a comment. And what you're seeing here is part of the structure that encourages students to think or to kind of train their analytical skills in the sense that they need to decide whether they agree or challenge with previous comments. And this is what you're seeing here, how the structure of the discussion, what that would look like. For us, I think for the instructors, and I teach as well, so I use Ment.io with my students, different very helpful tools such as top comments from the discussion, activity log, and so on and so forth. But maybe two more interesting screens would be one of the personal analytics that each student sees about themselves, how they are doing in the discussion, how many discussions they participated in, and so on and so forth. Their thought distance from other members of the team in terms of agreements and disagreements, and a cognitive map that really helps them improve even without us kind of holding their hand and leading them through that particular route. And lastly, just to touch upon what we do, what we have to do as instructors at the end of the day is grade our students, and the platform enables that with a set of indicators that the students are measured by, and we get the aggregated information, of course, and can apply it to our students. So that is a very, very quick introduction to what the platform is about. And I think I'll just mention, because, and this is kind of a way to start the conversation, that the benefits of using the platform, or the reasons that why people use the platform, touch upon different aspects, right? So Ment.io is used across many countries and many universities, and I speak to many instructors and I hear the different reasonings, and I assembled a few of these reasons to kind of lay the structure before we start actually discussing how the Global Forum takes all of that and elevates it to this international context. So one of the major ideas is to have a deep discussion rather than each student contributing their answer and that's it. The platform promotes the students to read what others are writing and to collaborate with as many people as possible. Secondly, we are more tentative and are able to hear what our students understand and what they know, which is extremely helpful to plan the next step of our teaching. It's really helpful with active learning, with empowering the students through analytics, with shaping up their discussion skills and the analytical ability to critique and make arguments. Assessment we touched upon, and last but certainly not least, and extremely useful to this context, is the fact that it enables some sort of bonding and understanding between the different students. And everything I said up to now is just a way of saying this is why Ment.io users use the platform. But now I think the interesting part is to hear from our panelists what got them to start with the global forums. And we'll have a set of 3 questions that I'll ask our panelists, and we'll start the conversation there. So I think I'll start with Evaristo, which was basically the person who came up with this brilliant idea. And so I'd love to hear from you. We'd all love to hear from you. What was it about this thing that made it something that you wanted to pursue? What was the value that you saw in it?
Well, thank you. First of all, thank you very much for the invitation. For me, it's fantastic. I enjoy it. I love it to be in this group. It was a wonderful experience. I want to also thank you to the audience, right? A lot of people that uh, I'm sure they are educators. They are thinking about helping their students. So good people, very, very good people that we have today with us. So in terms of what was the fundamental driver that I think we had is, if you see, we work for business schools, right? We teach business basically. And if you see what is happening with business, uh, they are more and more moving to digital, right? So we are in an age of digital globalization. And what happened when you enter in this age is that by definitions, the companies become born global companies, born global firms. So whatever you do is global, and you spend most of the time working globally. So if we have the future business leaders working globally all the time, it makes sense. It makes total sense that we should have a classroom without borders. So the fundamental strategic driver here is that to transform the classroom of the uh, atoms age, right, where the physical age, where we have the boundaries, to a new born global classroom, a classroom without borders, and the support, of course, of Mentayo to build that was fundamental. I don't know if I answered your question. I don't want to talk.
Thank you. That's a fantastic start. Kate, would you like to continue from there?
Yes, absolutely. So for me, teaching in an international business management degree program, this gave a wonderful opportunity for all of my students to participate in an international experience and start to build their network with students who are studying in a similar field in different countries around the world. And so for me, that was very important. The pandemic has meant that exchange programs, as we've traditionally known them, have been largely paused while it hasn't been safe to travel, etc. And so this has been a really great opportunity for students to connect around the world and talk to each other about how things are going. And I love to see the richness of the discussions in the Global Forum, students talking about what things are like from their perspective and sharing a little bit about their country and culture, and getting to learn about other countries and cultures as well. So that was really what drew me in. And also, I like to have really active, learning strategies and be creative with how it is that I'm bringing learning into the classroom. And so that opportunity as well to do something different beyond what they had perhaps experienced in other courses was very valuable. And of course, last but not least, there's the networking opportunities for me personally, and getting to meet and work with Sophie and Evaristo was such a privilege.
Thank you so much, Kate. Sophie, would you like to continue?
Absolutely. I mean, I can only second what my fantastic colleagues have already said. And I would like to add one last thing, or maybe just one more thing. What I really loved was giving my students the opportunity to apply the stuff that we had been talking about in our courses. My course was about critical thinking. And I used a lot of examples. I showed them, look at this for more than a second. Don't judge the book by its cover. Find more resources that support a statement. Make sure that you really truly look at things, you critically assess them before you form an opinion. And they were able to then use this and do this themselves, apply it in those discussions, because all of these discussions gave them room to say not just what they felt, but maybe also support it with evidence. This is why in the instructions we asked, can you provide examples from companies, organizations? Can you provide a reference for this? So they were able to apply what we had talked about in the course in a real world setting. And doing this in such an international context, I thought it was just brilliant.
Thank you. I think that what I'm hearing, if I'm connecting all of these qualities that you're describing is something about the breaking of borders, in the sense, or the overcoming borders, and the depth of conversation. And so I'm curious to hear, and that leads us to our second question. I'm curious to hear how it went for you, how it went for your students, how the construction came about, and how did it feel in different times during that experience. So maybe a little bit of detail of how that experience was for your particular course and students. So maybe start the other way around, or yeah, Sophie, please.
I can only speak about my students here, but in my case, they were actually babies. I know I'm not meant to call them babies, but they were the first semester of an undergraduate program. So a lot of this was new. The whole like online learning situation was new for them. So what really helped was for me to give them a lot of context, help them understand why are they doing this. And I think they were a bit hesitant at first just because they couldn't really imagine how this would work. But then when they realized, you know, the whole interface, everything is so fun and colorful, and it does remind them of what they do on a daily basis, or maybe even, let's be honest, hourly basis, namely using social media. I think they realized that it is actually a lot easier than they anticipated. They were worried that, oh, how do I do this conversation? And what do I say? And if someone said this, can I say this again? And I kind of just tried to remind them, it's an actual conversation. How would you talk to people? I mean, you have to type it out, but like, how would you do this in a real life? Just try and, you know, transfer this to a digital sphere. So when they realized that all of these not concerns, but, you know, worries that they had before, and like how this was going to go, when they realized that this was actually not a problem, they really got into it, and they really enjoyed it. So I think it was by experiencing it that they actually realized how much fun it could be.
Thank you. I think I'll interfere in a second for a second to say two things. One is to say that Kate and Evaristo, please feel free to, and Sophie, please feel free to just have a conversation, because I think what you're saying is really important. And that leads me, my second point is to say, I'm hearing a lot from Menti.io users about the actually training the students towards real life, towards working in corporates, in businesses that are international. And how do you make your point? How do you explain yourself to other people in the company because you want to make a point, or you want to change something, or you want to inquire about something? How do you do that in a way that is current, up to date, respectful, but yet really conveys your point? And I'm curious to hear if you had thoughts about that and how that played a role. So please, Kate or Evaristo, if you'd like to comment.
Sure, I can jump in. So my students were in a little bit of a different situation. So I have fourth year students. So my students were in their second last semester. And I had a much smaller class because we were in the HR major. So these were students who were quite a bit more experienced. This was their first use of Menti.io, but we were using it throughout the entire semester. So my students came into the global forum part of the course already having experience with Menti.io and engaging with each other. And so they were already sort of used to those norms of how to use it and familiar with the technology, which was nice. But certainly they were out on co-op terms in the middle of the pandemic. And so that looked very different for them. Most of them were working from their homes for the first time. And so this was a real sort of jumping right into the deep end of what it means to work remotely and to work with people from around the world. And so this gave them a real life experience to actually do that connection piece with people from different countries, and to understand the differences in the ways that people communicate and different ways that they support. I know that Sophie and Evaristo and I had a conversation. Menti.io, one of the great tools that it has is that when you are putting in a comment, you agree or you challenge, right? Canadians, we tend to not like conflict so much when we're thinking about cultural differences. And so to get my students to use the challenge button and to use that button myself, cognizant of the power that that holds when I do that as an instructor, was really important growth. And then, you know, chatting with Sophie, she was like, well, my students aren't going to be shy about that. And so it was a great opportunity to talk about the differences in the way that we communicate across different cultures, and that it's really important to not be judgmental and to be open-minded and to think about why somebody might choose to challenge you on something. And it's not personal when you're being challenged. That's how great ideas grow.
Thank you. That's fantastic. Evaristo, would you like to add?
Yeah, I will second everything said. A couple of brief comments. One, I think this intervention is a it transforms the students in terms of having this opportunity of exchanging ideas with people based in different countries, right? Which, you know, the university, our university, highly diverse, but here we have an additional thing, that you have somebody in a different country, in a different time zone, connecting. So from the point of view of the discussions, they are very rich because they are very diverse, and that of course fosters the creativity of the students because so many points of view together. So from the point of view of the students, is very, very positive. I think one of the things why I contacted Menta.io, and this is not advertising, right? This is just what happened, is that I really fall in love with the idea of having visual analytics for the students. I mean, for the professors is common, right? But for the students, if you don't have that, I think it's like having a discussion using the rear view mirror. So you have the discussion, and 3 or 4 days later, you see the grade given by the professor for what you did. Here in real time, the students are having a dashboard in visual analytics that allows the students to understand what they are doing. And I think that is very, very powerful. So at the level of the students, you have this transformation that is a database and data-centric transformation. At the level of the instructors, and I finish, I promise, I promise I finish fast. At the level of the instructors is also a transformation, because the opportunity of working with Sophie and Kate and Sophie, and co-creating the questions and co-creating the synchronization with learning objectives of the different courses and all that, is also a wonderful process for educators to become more global minded. And I stop here.
I think that's fantastic. Kate, Sophie, would you like to comment to that? Or should I move to the next question? It's yeah. So I think that's a fantastic point, Evaristo, and I think that leads me directly to the third question, which is, what have you learned? I mean, both you, the students, what were the challenges versus what are the benefits that you could see? And what are your thoughts to the next step? I mean, as pioneers, you have the benefit of, you know, you've experienced it firsthand and you know what it feels like. And so we're curious to hear about the way that you see the way forward, and if you have any ideas that you'd like to share in that regard.
I'm happy to go first. I think we all have a number of things that we learned from it, a number of things where we realized, okay, this can really help. I would say timing. Timing is really important. So picking the right time to do the discussion, because these different courses will be in different points in the semester. We all have very different semester schedules. You want to take into account whether there is any sort of breaks, holidays in between. So we've already decided that when we do this the next time, we realized, oh, there's going to be some sort of break in between. So we will do 2 weeks of the first question. Then we will actually give students a bit of a break because they will be on break, or at least some of them. And then we will resume the second question afterwards, because it would be really sad, if half of the participants weren't really participating because they are on a break, and we can't really force them to do this while they are on a study break. So timing can be really crucial, I would say. And probably also the mixing and matching with the different courses. So this is where Menta.io is going to be a huge help for all of us in signing up for the type of classes you want or you're looking for, and the type of semester schedules. Finding courses where you find some common ground, so that the students actually also can have some common ground to discuss on. But I'm sure that my colleagues probably have some more really good learnings that they can share with us.
I'd love to pick up on that one you just spoke about, Sophie, in terms of the matching between the courses. That was certainly one of the challenges that we faced as a team, because our courses were very different. So Sophie already spoke about, she's teaching a course in critical thinking. My course was in employee and labor relations and a senior HR course, and Evaristo was teaching an introduction to international business, basically. So our courses were really wide ranging, and that made it a bit more challenging for us to find common ground around questions that met our various course learning outcomes. And so and particularly because we wanted to do 8 different groups. So we were using different questions for different groups. And so coming to that common ground was a challenge for us. It was also a very rewarding experience. And it was one of my greatest learnings, actually, because what we had chosen that I thought was a fairly generic question actually spurred on one of the greatest discussions for the student groups. So it was so interesting to read that and to challenge my thinking around what made a good question in a global setting.
Evaristo, would you like to add your view on that?
Again, I second everything that was said, and I want to add something. It means I think at the end of the day, the fundamental learning is when you are surrounded by good people that they love what they do, you succeed. And I want to tell 2 things here. The students in Germany, Canada, and the US, they are wonderful. So they follow us. They want to succeed, and they are committed to learn. I think the challenges are with instructors sometimes, because we are super busy, or we are in an environment where innovation is not promoted. So the fundamental first thing is the people that you partner to lead this course. And I had the good luck, and I hope we will work together for many, 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 many years to partner with Kate and Sophie. So very good luck of that. So I would say my first learning is look for the right partners in terms of the instruction, right? People that they love what they do, that they are passionate, and they are hard workers, and they have not huge egos, right? So just we can work very good in teams. So that's one thing. And the other thing, and I finish in 60 seconds. The other thing is there are many, many solutions, right? I work in virtual reality, and I work in augmented reality, and I work with many, many solutions. But my learning is that technology, even if it's highly well developed, is not enough. You need behind the technology good people. And I have to say that it's very nice when you don't know how to use the technology to call, send an email. I have somebody who is a human. I love artificial intelligence, but I think the human touch is key. And I need to really say kudos and congratulations to, in this case, Menta.io for the customer service and the centricity that you have in customer service. And there are many others that are very good, but I want to underline this. It makes me feel more secure. I think it makes us feel very, very, very good during the process. And especially I want to say thank you to Anat that was with us in every single hour of all this process. I finish here.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I can only say that, as you said, if we love what we do, it comes across very clearly. And I think we all really love what we do. And that led me, Svika, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask if we have time for some questions that came from the audience. I got some questions over email and now a bit more, just if we have a few minutes to address those. Just to capture the questions, and please, whoever wants to jump in first, just go ahead. One was about the role of a global forum in exposing students to cultural differences. I think Kate mentioned a bit about the tendency to agree and disagree. Have you seen other tendencies that caught your attention, differences across ages, genders, anything that kind of drives attention specifically in a global forum that you as an instructor noticed and you maybe want to share that with the team?
I would say that, so we actually asked a question around equity, diversity, and inclusion to a couple of groups in the forum, because that was one of the topics that I was covering in my class, and Evaristo and Sophie were gracious enough to get on board with that question. What I found really heartening was the deep and yet very respectful conversations about what was going on in the different countries that the students represented. And what was truly interesting is, though the students were going to school in, Germany, Canada, or the US, they were really very international, with lots of students coming from different countries besides that. So we had this really, really rich discussion about these social issues going on around the world. And so it was really incredible for that. And I was super proud of the students for the maturity and the respect with which they engage with some pretty challenging topics. I was very impressed.
I can maybe just quickly add to this. I've had similar discussions, just among my students, but because it's such an international setting at our business school here in Munich, it will really truly have like 18 students. We will have 14 different nationalities. And what I've observed is that when the first person kind of opens up and shares something, an example from their country, an organization, or maybe even a personal example that is actually quite intimate, that is very raw, if you want, it totally shapes the whole discussion, because people respond to this. They respond to the raw honesty of just, human reality. And the whole discussion becomes very sensitive, and people kind of open up themselves, and they really respond to this. So you can really see how honesty from one person then resonates with the rest of the discussion group.
Wow, thank you for that. Another question that came up is related to analytical skills, specifically, I don't know if it's already legit to say post-COVID, but anything that happened from COVID going forward. Have you seen a shift in how students develop their analytical skills? Any shift in maybe focus on how they need to now articulate themselves in a different manner? And also, is the role of an instructor now different as a result of that, in how you kind of encourage that and kind of coach them to becoming better analytical thinkers?
I think
Evaristo.
Yes, Evaristo wants to jump in, please.
Well, thank you very much for the question. It's a very broad question, but there is no doubt that in an age of huge data, no big data, huge data, analytical skills are fundamental. But I think the fact of having a classroom without borders, it has two benefits. I mean, first of all, it helps the students to rely on analytics to understand how they are performing. So that's good. Visual analytics, right? Very basic analytics, but visual analytics. We try to request the students to participate on a evidence-based, what we call evidence-based conversation. So when they say something, let us know the evidence. Can be, of course, based on analytics that you what you are saying that, right? What are the sources, what you are saying. So it is important in that sense. But I will say also there is another component that is becoming very important is the fact of fostering creativity as a result of having different points of view in an age where we some of the students are living in kind of echo chambers, right? The kind of friends that they have in the social media are all the same, right? So when we put them in an environment, this global forum where, well, they are not in my social media, they come from different countries, different cultures, different religions, but we discuss a common topic together. Well, that fosters creativity too. So I hope I answer in some way the question.
Yes, definitely. And not time for more questions?
I think we can take one more before we get to some concluding remarks. And I'm actually curious. Yeah, please go ahead.
All right. So the question I have now is about recommendations you might have for fellow instructors, specifically about hybrid environment in the last year. A lot of people are talking about active learning and maybe the role of synchronous learning versus asynchronous learning. Again, did you identify any shifts in that? What do you recommend fellow instructors in how to adapt to the new norm, if we can call it that?
I'll jump in if that's okay. So one of the things that I really loved about using Menti.io, and I started using it last September, so I've got a full academic year under my belt with this platform. And I chose it very deliberately because I wanted to build an online discussion piece that could happen asynchronously into my courses, so that it wasn't just the synchronous time that we spent in class each week and then that lesson was done. It was the ability to continue the discussion beyond the synchronous space, the synchronous class time that we had. And so I used Menti.io in that way, where we had, a topic for the week. I use case-based teaching a lot, so we were using a case to explore the course concepts. And so I would have my class that had a certain set of discussion questions, and then I would build on that through Menti.io, so the student discussion continued through the entire cycle of the week. And I found that very valuable. At some point, I will probably go back to teaching in a classroom, but I will continue to use this asynchronous online discussion tool because I found it really added value and kept the students in that frame of mind and thinking about this topic, so that you didn't just come into class, etch a sketch it as you walked out the door, and that's it, that topic is done.
I can really only second what Kate just said, and I can't believe that I probably wouldn't have considered this type of asynchronous element hadn't it not been for the pandemic. And because of the pandemic, so you always, you need to find good things that have come out of this global disaster, because let's face it, that's what it is that I've discovered this fantastic value of doing something outside of the classroom where the students can decide when they are good and ready to do it. And it's no longer, pushing stuff on them, but they can decide, and they can do it 2 a.m. in the morning if they are a night person. They can do it 6 a.m. in the morning if they are a morning person. But also to kind of find a fun way for them to engage with the topic outside of the classroom. Just like Kate said, you don't leave the classroom and you're dropping the topic mentally, mic drop, it's done. Don't care about it anymore. But you go home, and then 2 days later, you are kind of confronted with this topic again. It's like, okay, now you engage with it, you think about it, and you actually actively engage through the discussion. So I am going to be using Menti.io for as long as I shall live and teach.
Fantastic. Evaristo, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think I second 100%. And just to add something, I think the hybrid approach is the right one. It means synchronic and asynchronic education together. I think one without the other doesn't work. That's what I understand. But when you go to the global forum, the core is asynchronic because you have the time zone challenge, right? So you really need to have a core which is asynchronic in the global forum. And after the synchronic, well, you can decide how you want to do it. It can be in the classroom, it can be in Zoom, it can be in new platforms that are being developed. It can be in virtual reality. That, by the way, is amazing. I'm teaching a course in virtual reality. I'm amazed. So you can decide, but I think the core is asynchronic because it's global in essence, and the time zone factor is very important.
Thank you. I think the asynchronicity of using the platform is the thing that creates the in-depth conversation. And as very passionate educators, I think we want our students to do exactly what you are describing, to think about what we're working on, right? To think about these topics and ponder about them and exchange ideas. And so I think this is part of, and we do this in our classes with Ment.io for them to consider the topics between classes and then acknowledge them in class and continue the conversation. And even more so with the global forum, where they have the ability to ping pong with people of completely different contexts to theirs. And the last comment I will make about this is to say that this is striking the interest of also industry leaders that feel that this type of conversation reveals something that no other type of conversation does. So it's the kind of topics and the kind of skills and different things that really spike the interest of industry leaders that have expressed their willingness and their desire to take part in different world forums. So that is always, that's also something to consider when you're thinking about your next groups, your next world forums teams. At this point, I'd like to thank you for this vivid and interesting panel, and just take us to the concluding remarks. So each of you, if you'd like, if you can say a few words that kind of summarize this for you, that you'd like to send the audience with on their way towards the end of our webinar. So maybe we'll start with Evaristo, is that okay?
Yeah. Well, what I want to say is I deeply celebrate, right, that we are in some way contributing to put so many people together around the world. It's so nice to see our students based in different countries, right, working together, discussing together, and we respect and valuing diversity and discussing important topics. It's also wonderful to have so many educators together. So what I want to say is I hope this is the beginning of more and more educators and students and institutions working together, preparing the next generations of global citizens.
Thank you. Amen to that.
I mean, there isn't really much to follow up on this. However, I wanted to say one last thing. It has been mentioned a little bit, but we did focus quite a bit on our students and the value that this gives to our students. I really truly felt grateful for having a Classroom Without Borders as an instructor, you know, getting to collaborate with Kate and Evaristo, because I'm also in a time of pandemic and I am craving this collaboration. And this was a fantastic opportunity for me to have to expand my borders and my horizons as well, and to talk to others who are in the same boat, teaching different courses, but literally experiencing all the same challenges and situations that we are in. So it was fantastic as well to be in a borderless classroom myself as an instructor. And I really want to say thank you both to Ment.io, who have facilitated this to no end, and obviously to Kate and Evaristo.
Thank you. Kate?
Of course, you know, Sophie and Evaristo have said it all so eloquently. So I'm going to focus on that it was fun. It was fun for the students. My students really appreciated that opportunity to get outside what has become a pretty narrow little box over this pandemic time, and to do something differently. And although the pandemic has put limitations on, it's also opened doors in terms of, for me personally, creativity in my teaching and trying things that I wouldn't have tried if it had been a school year as normal. And so I really valued that. It was fun for me just to engage with these amazing colleagues, as well as to watch my students represent our school and our country in an international environment. It was fabulous.
Thank you.
Wow. I want to jump in with a question I didn't mean to ask, but it relates to Kate talking about fun. There's a question that came in from someone who identified themselves as being enterprise related, right? They're not coming from higher education, but they still came in. And what they highlighted is the fact that if you judge during COVID and the new norm that happened in the last year, getting results versus getting the process right. So they mentioned that they felt like a lot of things are getting executed more efficiently and organizations get results quickly, but something about the process is compromised, whether it's the personal touch, not being in the same environment. And I think Kate kind of touched a bit of that by creating a fun experience, make sure that the process and the inner relations are still a key part of how we interact with each other. But if you have any comments on that, I think it will be a great way to conclude the session. So how do you keep the process vivid and fun, and how do you adapt to this reality?
Just a second before we let you respond to that, I want to, Evaristo has to teach in 2 minutes. So I want to wholeheartedly thank you for being here and for taking part in all of it. So thank you, Evaristo. We really, really appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you to the audience. We keep in touch.
Dedicated educator. What can you do? Thank you, Evaristo.
Thank you.
Sophie and Kate, would you like to?
I can put my industry hat on if you'd like. So I do work in industry. One of the things that we're talking about with clients, and we've just done some research out of our organization, is the amount of loneliness that people are feeling right now. So we just did a survey. It's Canadian based, but I wouldn't be surprised to see that those findings are applicable in different areas of the world. About 70% of people are reporting that they feel lonelier now than they did prior to the pandemic. And it is impacting their general well-being and mental health. And so this is a way to think about connecting with people in an asynchronous way, because the other thing is Zoom fatigue is real, right? And we have people who are saying, I can't take any more Zoom meetings, and can we please do some things asynchronously? And so looking at tools that help us to get to the outcomes and to consider the processes along the way, because I agree that's very important, but doing it in a way that doesn't require us to be on camera all the time is very valuable. So I guess that would be my perspective on that question.
And I think building on that, obviously my students struggle exactly with the same issues, loneliness being one of the major kind of things that have been elevated during the pandemic. A discussion like this, especially when it's about honest and raw topics, it can give you a feeling of being heard without having to do a soul striptease, without having to go on camera and look perfect. You can do it, I don't know, from the comfort of your bed, 1 a.m. in the morning, when you're feeling a bit down, when you're doubting yourself, and then other people are going to see what you write, and they will hear you, they will listen to you, and they will respond. So I'm not saying it's going to cure the world, but it might be a tiny step towards, giving people that feeling that they are not truly actually alone. There are other people, and they might be miles and miles away, but they might still, listen to what you have to say, and not do it in a vile kind of way as we are sometimes used from social media comments, but in an honest and open way where you want to have an actual conversation.
Thank you. I think that it is a good point to end this really interesting webinar with, and to first of all relate in a very personal way to say, I felt the same way with all of you, and how this working together had been fantastic. And I'm looking forward to so much time ahead of continuing to communicate. So, and I want to thank you so much for joining us in this webinar, and thank the audience for your questions, for listening, for joining us. Thank you from all of us, and for being such fantastic pioneers and champions and just wonderful people and educators. Thank you.